how can you win at a game you've never played before? The skills to build a business are very different to run that business and are certainly different than to sell it. But nobody tells us that. That's why 90% of exits fail, or even worse.
Meet Jeffrey Feldberg,
who rejected a 7-figure offer
and then unlocked the secret to a 9-figure exit.
80% of a company's value starts and stops with a narrative. So for the listener out there, are you a storyteller?
Materially, what changed between 7-figure and 9-figure?
To the uninitiated, what I'm about to say sounds absolutely crazy.
Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. This is Jeff Lerner, your host. Always so thrilled to be back with you, having incredible conversations with incredible human beings. Today, we are joined by Jeffrey Feldberg, who is an entrepreneur, had an e-learning startup back in the day, Embanet, that grew originally out of his parents' attic and ultimately exited for 9 figures, kind of the true entrepreneurial dream. He now has a platform called Deep Wealth, where he's on a dedicated mission to equip business owners with strategies for maximizing business value and achieving lucrative exits, much like he did. Has quite a bit to offer and a really, really interesting story. And instead of just reading his biography, I'm going to let you hear it from the man himself. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff, great to be here. Love your name, by the way. Absolutely terrific.
It is. We had a discerning parents, clearly, didn't we?
Clearly.
You know, as we were talking about a little bit before we hit record here, I'm obviously interested in, exciting entrepreneurial, stories, right? They call it the unicorn type of stories, right? People that take a thing that starts as this little thing and becomes this big, life-changing thing. Like that's the lure of, that's the dream, right, of entrepreneurship. But what I have found in my experience is that behind those stories, the real insight often has as much or more to do with the person behind the story than the story itself. So that's kind of where I want to start, is with you. I'll give away the ending, so to speak. What I'm always looking for is, everybody dreams, right? Every kid out there has a dream. Every kid wants to be an astronaut or a, professional athlete or do some grand thing with their life. And yet, sadly, not everybody does. And I'm always looking for what was it that was within a person or occurred for a person that was ultimately predictive, or at least had the possibility built into it of what ultimately would happen for those people whose results we would like to go out and emulate. So that's the lens I'm kind of looking at your story through, and I'd love to hear it from you. Tell me about Jeffrey Feldberg, the boy who became a man, who became an entrepreneurial success story. And what is it that you think would be relevant for the audience to know, to kind of understand the arc that you took?
Yeah, I love that question, Jeff. And let's go beyond the typical headlines or expectations and talk about the things that you don't really hear about. And, right off the bat, for your community, for the listener, I will share that my journey, I had more failures, so-called failures, than what some people would call success or wins. And when you talked about Embenet, which was a tremendous success, that really, it wasn't Jeffrey that was there. I had a terrific team of people around me, but even beyond that, it was having terrific mentors and role models in my life growing up that really made the difference. I don't believe, and perhaps I'll offend some listeners here, I don't believe in the self-made person. To me, that doesn't exist. I stand where I stand today because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Some of those people, maybe they were in my life for a very short period of time, others for a longer period of time, but I became who I am today because of the people that I surrounded myself with and the people who took an interest and care in me and believed in me, even at times I didn't believe in myself, to help me get to where I got to. And that would be the first thing that I put out there, is that for me, my journey, really, it's a reflection of the help that I received along the way, when in a lot of cases, looking back, I didn't deserve that help, but I got it anyways. And I'm so grateful for that. And that's why today I'm so passionate about paying it forward, making a difference, and helping out there. Whether you're thinking about starting your entrepreneurial journey or you've been at it for a while, happy to shed any insights along the way of what was helpful for me that perhaps could be helpful for you, your listeners, the community.
So we talk a lot about mentorship here on the show, in my book, in our community, and I'm always really intrigued. Well, I'll say this: I personally, I've had a lot of mentors over the years. I'm 45. I've been an entrepreneur basically since I was 16 and dropped out of high school and started trying to figure out an alternative path. And it's like you're saying, there's been it's almost like this quixotic journey, right? There's all these interesting characters along the way. But I've always been really interested in the question, why would a mentor take interest in me? Especially in the modern world where there's this idea, this sort of perspective of accessibility. Like everybody's got an Instagram profile, everybody's got LinkedIn, like everybody's a direct message away, right? It's not like maybe when you and I were younger, where like you had to call the secretary to get through the gatekeeper to even get the email address to even, or even the physical address to feel like you even had a chance to correspond with somebody. Now it feels like everybody's accessible, yet at the same time, or maybe because of that, everybody's actually less accessible in a way. And so you've kind of, I think everybody wants to find the perfect mentor, but maybe not everybody's thinking about what it means to be the perfect mentee. So do you have any thoughts around why do you think the right mentors were interested in you? And maybe more broadly, how can somebody think about being of interest to the right mentor?
Terrific questions. And looking back at myself, putting myself under the microscope, what made me different than a lot of people, I said what I did and I did what I said. I finished what I started. And I know for a lot of the mentors along the way, that was a common theme. Jeffrey, not a lot of people that I deal with actually finish what they start. You said that you would do this. You told me that you'd follow up in this period of time. And here you are to the day you're following up. And so for me, I said, listen, I don't know what I don't know. This person, not that they're necessarily better than me or smarter than me. And in a lot of cases, they were smarter than me and better than me. But that being said, they've been down this journey. And if they're gracious enough to share their time, their wisdom, their insights, let me pay back with respect, value their time, and really do what I said I'm going to do to say, hey, yeah, really respect what you're doing. Thank you so much for helping me along the way. And Jeff, by the way, some of the mentors, they were with us or living people like us right now today, but a lot of them weren't. It was books. It was audio books. It was going to seminars back in the day. They weren't webinars. We're dating ourselves a little bit here before all the technology came in. But some of them weren't here today. And what I love about books and biography, some of my best mentors, I took 50 years, 80 years of their life, and in a few hours, I absorbed that. And I got those incredible lessons of what was there. Yeah, maybe some different time periods and different language that was being used. But human nature is human nature, and principles, best practices are the same.
Yeah, I love that you kicked it back to like, look, mentorship doesn't always mean one-on-one, somebody taking, their time in a binary sense and saying no to everything else in their life so they can say yes to an hour with you, right? That's because I think a lot of times people, and I'm projecting my own experience. I run a an online education platform, and I know you come from e-learning, right? So like people a lot of times are looking for obviously something to alter the trajectory of their life, but a lot of times they reach a point where they go, if I could just, and I hear this a lot, can I just get someone to like hold my hand and walk me through the thing or show me how to do the thing? And, there's like learning theory around proximity that like we do actually learn more when people show us how to do things. But I guess I think that it's really important, and I'd like to get your take on this, to like, being a good mentee, you talked about valuing their time. So to me, whether it's reading a book or having a one-on-one coaching session, there's this like responsibility as a mentee to do every single possible thing that I can do for myself before I ask it of someone else. And I sometimes there's almost like a laziness of like, well, if somebody would just show me how to do it, then, it'd be easier. But it's like, no, I think a lot of times mentors, to your point, are looking to see how much personal responsibility a person is taking, and sort of at the same time valuing their time in so doing. So, yeah, I'm curious, and I never know where we're going to go with these conversations. Do you have any experiences maybe where there was a critical relationship that at some level you won their interest because of character traits that you brought to the relationship that maybe others didn't?
Short answer is yes. And it's not just, there's a theme. It's not just with the mentors. It was not only with the mentors, it was with future clients or future on the business side, future business relationships. And it's persistence, it's tenacity. So whether I'm reaching out to someone who I think could really share some insights and be a mentor or help, or researching them or finding out about them, or looking to get in front of someone who I really think could value what we're doing on the business side. It was just the sheer tenacity of not giving up, of showing up consistently day after day and getting rejected. Hey, that's okay. Maybe they're just having a bad day. I'm going to keep on showing up until you tell me, Jeffrey, get out of my face. I don't want you calling me. I don't want you here anymore. Nothing I can do for you. There's the door. But until you tell me that in a respectful way, not in a creepy stalker way, I'm going to show up and present myself and explore how can we perhaps help each other, or what can we do to create a win-win-win for everyone involved. And for me, that served incredibly well when it was seeking out people today, who could help. Books, autobiographies, that's a whole other story. It's obviously a whole lot easier to do. But the same theme, after reading a book, getting some insights. Firstly, how many people actually finish a book? The statistics are crazy. Don't hold me to this, I'm not far off. I want to say it's between 75 and 90% of people pick up a book, start it, never finish it, never complete the programs. I finished those books, start to finish. And it just didn't end there. It was, okay, what were the notes that I took? What summaries can I make? What lessons were there? How do I begin to implement it? And it wasn't, let me finish this book so I can go on to the next book, and I'm just checking off a list. Oh, look how many books I've done. It was, hey, let me really understand what's in this book, this wisdom that's there, apply what works for me, make it my own. And I was always a big believer, Jeff. I didn't have to come up with something completely novel or new. I could take someone else's idea, make it my own, put the Jeffrey spin on it, and then take that to the world. And for me, that made a tremendous difference. I didn't have that syndrome of not invented here, so I can't do it. That didn't exist for me. I was very open to, hey, what can I learn? What can I take from someone that they've done, and put a little bit of a different take on that, put my take on that, and see where that goes.
So that's multiple times now you've in different words, you've described essentially the character trait of being a person that actually finishes things. You do it, you say you're going to do something, and you actually do it. You pick up a book and tell yourself, I'm going to read this book, and you actually read it all the way through. I know, from personal experience, like it's almost 50% of people. We have our program currently has a $39 course that we sell on the front end, kind of a, teaser, try it out course. And about 50% of the people that buy it never even log in to access it. Mm-hmm. And then of the 50% of people that do log in to access it, 60% of them never even complete it. And it's only about 2 hours long. Mm-hmm. It's a teaser. It's like epidemic out there, just not finishing things. And I love that you're going so strongly to character. I assume you've read Stephen Covey, or 7 Habits, that whole,
of course, sure,
world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he talks about that pre-World War II, we had this, his term was success was grounded in what he called a character ethic. There were these sort of timeless, universal principles and traits. And then, post-World War II, he says we've evolved toward what he called a personality ethic, where it's not like, hey, I'm dependable, I'm reliable, I have integrity, I'm conscientious. Now it's more like I'm unique and I'm flashy and I'm funny and I'm quirky and I'm different. Like it's all about personality, and that the timeless success traits are this character ethic that's kind of not as exciting maybe as doing flashier stuff to get attention now. And I just love that I feel like you're sort of taking a stand for like, guys, these these traits are timeless. It's not about being the most idiosyncratic person in the room. It's, the really successful people are looking for timeless traits, I feel like is what you're saying. So let me move toward to the actual entrepreneurial mechanics. You mentioned failures. Any failures that you feel like are foundational to your success story that would be worth sharing?
Jeff, every failure is foundational to what happened. One of the sayings that came out of it, and believe me, when I was going through it, look, I can laugh now. Back in the day, I was crying. It was painful. Some of the darkest days in my life. I didn't understand it at the time. I mean, here I was working out of my parents' attic. My friends coming out of my MBA program, they were going on to these big gigs with these corporations, signing bonuses, vacations, cars, homes. Jeffrey's at home with his parents in the attic, nothing to really show for it, fumbling my way around, no money, no experience, no team. But it was that adversity, that not having that money, not being able to write the check, even if I wanted to, it helped me develop my sense of resilience. And for me, resilience trumps resources all day, every day. And a quick story for you. So building Embanet, which you mentioned earlier, no money, had to be really ingenious of how we did things. Our competition, they had venture capital, private equity behind them, out the yazoo, all these zeros in the bank. We didn't have that. Myself, the team, it forced us to really be creative. Post-exit, I had the experience, I had the team, I had the zeros in the bank. I didn't rely on the resilience. I became lazy. I was driven by my ego, completely flopped and failed. Embenet was like the bumblebee. According to scientists, the bumblebee should never fly. It doesn't have the aerodynamics and the body weight, all those other things. No one ever told us it's a bumblebee. It doesn't know any different. Embenet was the same way. On paper, we should have been a failure. Some of the ventures after Embenet, on paper, were a huge success. In reality, were a failure. And so resilience is huge. It's what we don't get, what doesn't happen, but the learning lessons from it, because we all have a choice. We don't get our way. Okay, we can go sulk about it. We can cry to everyone about it, how it's not fair. Look what the world is doing to me. We can play the victim, or we can be the victor and say, okay, yeah, not easy. What did I learn from this? Let me try it again. Let's see what isn't working, where I can take it from a different angle, try it in a different way. Maybe this is going to work. And it was literally, almost reminds me of that Al Pacino speech, Inches, that great speech. It wasn't even inches. It was, a tenth of an inch, every step along the way of that journey of just really learning the hard way of what to do. But later on, it's because of that we became more efficient. We became more profitable. We became more of that winning mindset than what our competitors were doing because we had that work ethic. Back to those values that we're talking about. It was a cultural thing that we had that really made the difference for us.
So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the soundbite out. Resilience over resources every time. That's honestly, if somebody takes nothing out, like stop listening now, take nothing else from this podcast. If somebody, I will just speak for myself. Give me resilience over resources any day. I totally agree. Man, there's so much you're saying about I love the bumblebee analogy. You know what? I'll tell you what came to mind, especially when you were talking about these sort of like incumbent funded competitors, is Rocky 4, the Ivan Drago, this perfectly sculpted specimen that's got on all the right drugs and has all the right trainers and has the entire, Soviet Union government investment behind him in his training. And then you got this scrappy, mutt from Philadelphia named Rocky. Sounds like you guys were Rocky.
Yeah, we were Rocky in every sense of the way. What some people consider old school really isn't. And it's so easy for us to just write that off. Oh yeah, that was done back in the day, but it doesn't work today. Times have changed, technology has changed. Let's go with what we have today. And a lot of times things have been around for a long time because there's a reason. It works. And it's a matter of, okay, how do I separate out the noise to get to the really good stuff and then begin to apply that, learn from that, keep on going with that. I've learned a lot from the failure about momentum. Momentum, it takes a while to build. And the challenge with the human condition for all of us, I don't care who you are, once we're successful, what we don't realize, the seeds of failure are in the success that we have today. And so we can sit back and say, yeah, I'm successful. Things are amazing. Things are going great. I don't have to do anything. That's how some of the titans of business have fallen. They're no longer around. Or it's always saying, okay, great, we're successful today, but what do I need to do today, tomorrow, the next day to continue to be of value, to be of service for the community, for all the stakeholders, for my clients, that they're going to keep on coming back for more.
Yeah, I'm thinking, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of, there's these apocryphal sort of legendary stories of in entrepreneurship. Obviously, Blockbuster saying no to acquiring Netflix for $50 million is a pretty famous one. Kodak saying no to, Kodak invented digital film.
That's right.
I think 20 years before they went out of business, but they squashed it because they thought their business model needed to sell film. Stuff like that. Yeah. And there's obviously so many smaller examples. So actually, you mentioned, I wonder if you could double click on something you shared or that you said. You said there's these old school things that people sort of say, that's not how it works anymore. I wonder if you get specific, like, are there any things that you feel like maybe people tend to consider out of fashion that are actually like timeless gems that they're missing because they're looking for the newer, sexier thing?
Absolutely. It's a boring word. There is no silver bullet to this stuff. It's preparation. But whatever it is that you're doing, you're showing up in front of a prospective client or you're applying for a job. Are you just showing up thinking the world owes me? Or are you putting the time and effort in? As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about a classic book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. And there's many stories that's struck with me and have stayed with me. But there's one story that he shares. It was when his son was applying for a job. It wasn't enough. I believe his son's name was Blair. It wasn't enough for Napoleon Hill's son, Blair, just to show up to, it was this hearing aid company, which back in the day was revolutionary. He didn't just show up to the company to apply for the job. He did market research. He did a business plan. He showed up with, here's where you are, here's where you're not, here's some ideas that I have of where we can take you. And surprise, surprise, he got the job. And that's always stayed with me with whatever I do. Okay, what kind of time and effort can I put in to really learn about this? And yeah, maybe it's not going to pan through. And some people say, Jeffrey, you wasted your time. You should just show up. And it's not to use that as a crutch or an excuse. Well, I'm not ready to talk to someone today because I still haven't done the research. There's always a right kind of mix or a healthy tension, if you will, that's with that. But back to your point today, it's a world of convenience that we live in. So how many of the listeners have you done an old school thank you note, pen and paper, put a stamp on it, mail it for someone that you just spoke with on the personal side, on the business side? Hey, Jeff, really enjoyed speaking with you today. Thank you so much. Here's what I took out of our conversation today. I'll be thinking of this for the next while. Really appreciate that. What are we doing to stand out from anyone else? Or at the very least, are we sending an email, which doesn't get any easier than an email, but what are we doing to let the person know, hey, I heard you. I appreciate what you did. And I value what you're bringing to the table. And because of that, here's what I've done for you to show how I respect you and what I've done. So it's that preparation along the way. And by the way, Jeff, much like yourself, with my own journey, hiring and going out there and putting yourself out there, looking to have people come on and join the team. To this day, I've never yet seen someone who's followed that example. With Think and Grow Rich was what, written back in the early 1900s, give or take, maybe 1920s, 1930s. It's all those years later. No one's ever come, hey, Jeffrey, here's where your company is. I've done a business proposal or a business plan. Here's where I think we can take you. It's just amazing what we don't do. And I think today we're speaking about values a little bit earlier. It feels as though, at least for me with social media, a lot of good in social media. One of the downsides, though, it feels as though our moral compass has just gone in a different direction, that we've lost some of those really timeless values that make a difference.
Well, I think, I can look it up real quick. It's interesting. When did, if I look up 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it was published in 1989. So long before social media, but he was already calling out this personality ethic versus the character ethic. But I mean, where we really see that crystallize is with social media. It's like, it's however I present myself to the world is in a very superficial, almost like minimal way. It's really whatever first impression I can generate to the world is presumed to be the totality of who I am, rather than anything that would require deep experience to get to know me. And that has become sort of our way that we view the world. It's interesting that Covey caught that, but I do agree so much. So as you described it, it wasn't just preparation; it was also about follow up or follow through, you might say. So as you were talking, I was thinking, and to be honest, I was a little convicted. I'm like, he's totally right. Even podcast episodes, right? We have this system, you and I, right? We have this system set up where we ask you to submit sort of a basic bio of talking points so that basically I can, get to know you in 5 minutes before you come on the episode so that we can have a conversation that sounds like we probably know each other better than we really do. Whereas a more thoughtful approach would be to take an hour and really go get to know you as best I can and dig into your website and dig into your thought leadership. And to be honest, I'm convicted. I'm like, I should do more of that. But as I'm and then the follow-up is like, okay, and I'm not taking this as like you're insisting on this, but like I should send you a thank you note. I should, sometimes I go on podcasts and I've gotten physical like it's in the mail that have handwritten thank you notes, a book that's maybe hand signed. And I'm like, those really leave an impression. They leave an impression on my wife too. She's like, when are you going to get this out of my kitchen? But, but as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, if I start thinking of every activity, not as the activity unto itself, but also preparation for the activity, and then an allowance of time for follow through on whatever the activity was. Well, the reason I naturally go to resistance is because, dang, I just don't have time to do as much if I actually do all that on everything that I do. And I think that's the tension, the dissonance is people are like, we live in this world where the expectation is time is short, do as much as you can. But to do things thoroughly requires doing fewer things.
Yeah, so much of what you're saying. And it got me thinking, Jeff. One of the takeaways for the listener is this is what you and I are talking. Perhaps it resonates with us, perhaps it doesn't. One of the things really I failed for a large part of the journey was in taking everything so literally. Well, just because this person did it, that means I've got to do it like this and I got to follow them. They walk on water and they're just incredible, and not really taking a step back and saying, hey, that did work for them. And they have a terrific journey and all the respect to them. But you know what? Some of that's just not going to work for me. And so to throw it back at you, Jeff, sure, I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I could easily say, speaking as you, well, yeah, listen, that works for Jeffrey, but I do have other responsibilities, and in my own way, maybe it'll be at the end of the podcast. We're not recording this. I'll just say a heartfelt thank you to you, or maybe I'll just dash off a quick email. It's really showing up as you. I think it was Oscar Wilde, or I'm not quite sure who said it. It's a terrific quote. Stop trying to impersonate other people. They're already taken. Just be yourself. And there's a lot to be said for that, of doing what works for you. And it's okay to say, as terrific as this person is or was, and as successful as they are or were, good on them. That's just not me. That's not going to work for me. This is how I'm going to show up to the world and do it this way.
I take your point. There's an authentic way to do anything that is the way of me. That's the Jeff, the me way, right? That said, I do think it's a very practical and beneficial question, and this aligns with a lot of the work that we do on purpose and core values and stuff, is to say, how are timeless values showing up in my life? Like maybe I have my own way of applying them or manifesting them, but like, are timeless values at play in my life or not? And I, anyway, it's just a lens to look at ourselves through. My way of following through, my way of going that extra mile or putting that extra touch on everything that I do, it might look different than yours, but fundamentally, am I doing that or not, is a question that everyone can look at. So I'm curious. Let's get into some of the plot points, let's say, of your entrepreneurial journey. Embenet was not, I gather, your first venture out of college?
It was my first venture out of college, just to give some perspective. Jeffrey, the little boy growing up, in my heart of hearts, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm not sure that word was around back in the day, but I knew I wanted to be in business. I wanted to be my own business owner. Didn't know what, didn't know how, didn't really make a difference. I just knew one day when Jeffrey grows up, I'm going to do something in business. That's really what resonated with me. And so through high school, I got involved in multi-level marketing. I was selling, of all things, water purifiers, which taught me the art of the story. Because in learning how to sell and how to present, it was all about, well, what's the story? How do you present? And yes, my family got inundated with water purifiers. God bless them. They bought from me. It had me feel good. I was, with that. But it taught me a lot. Then from there, started a video production company and was doing just local events. And my father got me a few corporate jobs along the way on the video side. And so really heading into that, it was always entrepreneurial. Truth be told, I had one job. It was an internship. This was during my MBA program. And as I look back to it, I would have fired myself on day one. I knew I was a terrible employee. I had no business being there. Somehow I was, but I knew, Jeffrey, when you're done with this, just go start your own company. And so coming out of the program, again, very blessed. My father, my uncle, really my mentors, my role models in their own right, very successful on the business side. And it would have been very easy to step into the family business and continue along that direction. But I said to myself, you know what, Jeffrey, dig your own hole. Are you going to bury yourself in it, or are you going to get out of it on your own and be your own man, whatever that looks like, and see where it can take you? And so that was a decision that I made. I didn't please some of the family members in terms of doing that, but it was my own journey, the chart that I really put together for myself in terms of doing that, and went into the world of business having no idea of what to do and no money other than following my passion. So Embenet really came from, in my MBA program, it was really one of the toughest experiences. I don't know if this is going to be, people are seeing us or if you're hearing us. If you're hearing us, I had a lot more hair back in the day. I lost a lot of the hair from the MBA from all the stress that I went through. My first semester was a miserable experience, just miserable. And we were doing a lot of teamwork and we're in a team, and the team was talking about breaking up and doing all those other things. I said, oh my God, I got 2 years of this. There's got to be a better way. And so started with the problem, solved the problem for my group. We got straight A's, went from the worst group to the best group, felt guilty about that, of having this precious resource, shared it with the rest of the class. And it became this renegade system that took over not only the program, but the entire school. And so coming out of the MBA program, I said, hey, if it worked here, this could work in other places. And the internet was just coming out. When you spoke about the web at the time, people said, what, a spider's web? What are you talking about? What kind of web? It was something new. But that was really the beginning of starting the company, from the little bit of experience I had with water purifiers and video production companies. So for listeners out there, I didn't start with all this experience. I didn't have these really mentors. Okay, Jeffrey, do this, do that. It was a lot of trial and error. I was bootstrapped all the way through, decided very deliberately not to take money into the company. I wanted to have control over what we did, how we did it, knowing that there were some downsides to it, but I was okay with those downsides, and really throwing my caution to the wind and saying, okay, where can we take this? Let's see what we can do. And that was really the very humble beginnings.
So I got to share a couple things that made me chuckle inside. One is talking about only having one job that was an internship, and knowing that you would have fired yourself. I only had one job. It was also an internship, and I did get fired. I was 16. I was 16, and I realized, yeah, that was my test run of being at the bottom of somebody else's bad day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to do that anymore. I actually shortly thereafter dropped out of high school to become a jazz musician, because I said, well, if that's what working for money looks like, then I want to work for something other than money. I want to create. I want to at least do something that they can never take away from me, And anyway, so I chuckled at that. I also chuckled at water purifiers. Dare I ask, what kind of water purifiers were they?
It was the under the sink or the countertop. It was the charcoal water filters that would purify,
Okay.
most of the stuff out of the waters.
Okay, so yeah, I actually had experience with a direct sales company that was water enhancers, I guess you might call them. They would infuse hydrogen into the water. So, and I have 3 of them in my home. I have one of them here in my office. My parents have one. So when you talked about your family having water purifiers everywhere, I felt I related on that point too. Great products, but not, direct sales is not the business for me, I'll say. Okay, so Tell me about maybe some of the biggest struggles, or maybe what was the moment or the challenge that you faced, the existential challenge that you faced? I have to know there were probably more than one, but tell me about an existential challenge you faced when you already said that on paper the business shouldn't have worked. How did that show up in the face of an existential challenge, and how'd you get through it?
Hey there, it's Jeff. So real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. I use text messages to provide unique value to the Unlock Your Potential community. These texts could just be random thoughts. It could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning, maybe giving an update on a special I'm running or some free training that I host for my community. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that is 702-996-3926. Let's get back to the podcast.
Jeff, there are challenges every day. I mean, to the outside world, it looked like smooth sailing. Oh, here's this company. They're providing incredible service and they're growing all the time. It's a picture of success. But behind the scenes, it was chaotic. I mean, as an entrepreneur, company was struggling with, okay, we got to one level of success. Terrific, but what worked yesterday no longer works today. We have to invest capital, money back into the company to hire more people, expand the technology, expand the systems. It wasn't like today where, again, we're in the e-learning business, so it's a technology business. It wasn't like you had the cloud and you can just click on a few buttons and boom, you start a new server and it's relatively inexpensive. Talking data centers and servers and IT people and office space, not like what we have today with remote work. And so it was really hardcore capital intensity of, okay, we got to this level and that's great, but we're not going to stay here if we keep on doing the same thing. The competition is nipping at our heels. The marketplace is changing. So this little nest egg called some profits that it took a long time to get, we've got to reinvent that and reinvest that and put that back into the system, reinvent who we are and get back out there. And so some of the struggles was the mindset. I failed in this area. I don't believe in balance. If you want balance, read a book, go to a movie. I do believe in blending, where you can blend the work activities with the family activities. But in the early days, I failed miserably, wasn't the best husband, wasn't the best father. I was a work addict and it took its toll physically, mentally. I was just on 24/7. I didn't know any different of how to do that. And I was just on it all the time. And so I failed in that regard. Looking back, I would tell the younger Jeffrey, hey, enjoy the journey, Jeffrey. You're going to get there. Enjoy the journey. Look where you are and you're exactly where you need to be, but enjoy the people around you. Not going to be there forever. And enjoy who they are, where you are. Take some time out and enjoy where you are with that. So failed on that side. Some of the team members who helped us get going, I mean, we were more like a family in the early days than really a business. And the people who lifted the company up to get to where it got to, some of them just couldn't take the company to the next level. And so how tough it is to look at someone in the eye and say, I'm sorry, you didn't get that promotion, or I'm sorry, what you're doing, the company doesn't need anymore. And you either got to do this or we're going to have to show you the door. We'll take care of you as best we can, but we can't continue the way that we have. That was some tough days, doing that. Or having customers come along saying, hey, it was great when you got us from the very beginning, you got us where we got to, but we're bigger now and we want to go with a bigger company. We don't think you're big enough for us. We think you're too entrepreneurial, too small. So there's always challenges along the way. I remember when one of our companies, they either went public or they raised a lot of capital and it was, oh my goodness, have we just lost everything that we've done? Look at what they're doing and what's there. And there's a part of the journey where I'm looking in the rearview mirror too much at what the competition is doing instead of just focusing on what we should be doing and just eyes straight ahead and let's look at what we can do, what we can control instead of what other people are doing that we have no control over. So lots of challenges along the way, lots of pressure, lots of stress. Some of that was needed, some of that probably not. But it all worked out the way that it did.
What, obviously the business, was acquired, I gather was acquired. And I know that that's what you do now, or a big part of what you do now is helping businesses kind of begin and or proceed with the end in mind. In the time that we have left, I wonder if you could speak to really sort of as broadly as possible, for people at all stages, like what are some of the core tenets of building something that ultimately is going to be of interest to someone else, transactionally?
So what we do, based on the experience that I had with the Embanet, and having done that, having said no to a 7-figure offer, putting together this crazy and wacky system, flying all across the country, speaking to investment bankers and M&A specialists and entrepreneurs that really hit a grand slam and entrepreneurs that really didn't do so well, putting all that together, that was the system that had us, really the same company, Jeff, the same service, the same everything, that went from a 7-figure offer that we said no to a different buyer, different offer, 9 figures. What was the difference? It was that system that we did. And that's now what Deep Wealth, the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery, or Scale for Ultimate Sales system is really all about, of taking those strategies from the trenches and applying it. I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question, Jeff. I love my rhetorical questions. How can you win at a game you've never played before? Because the skills to build a business are very different to run that business and are certainly different than to sell it. But nobody tells us that. And as business owners, we just go in like a deer in the headlights and wham, we just get hit. That's why 90% of exits fail, or even worse, a business sells and the business owner is saying very proudly, look at what I did, I got this and that. What they don't realize, 50% to over 100% of the deal value is in the investor or buyer's pocket. They left it on the table. Look at me. If I said yes to the 7 figures, I would have said no to the 9 figures that I didn't know was there, but I created. So what can we do? So the first thing is actually step 1 big picture in our 9-step roadmap. What are, some people call them blind spots, we call them inflection points. What's going on in the marketplace? So as an example today, Jeff, artificial intelligence, AI, that is an inflection point for everybody that's out there. So are we going to bury our heads in the sand and say, I'm not going to deal with it? Never been good with technology. I'm just going to ignore it and let other people figure that out. Well, it's a great way to put yourself out of business, have the marketplace put you out of business, the competition to put you out of business. Or are we going to say, hey, I don't know much about this. Let me learn about this. How can I leverage this inflection point that I can put myself out of business into a bigger, more profitable business? And then from there, we focus on things like, what really makes your business unique? Does the business run without you? And now, having been out there and speaking with buyers and investment bankers and that whole crazy crew and that zany, wacky world of M&A, I can share with you that investors and buyers, they don't want a second full-time job known as your company. They want a company that runs without the owner, runs without the founder, that there's a team that's there, because they know, despite what we may think as entrepreneurs, when you bring in investors, when you sell the company, they may not want you there. They have their own plans, and they need to know that the company is going to be there tomorrow when you're not there. And there's some companies where they do have a leadership team, they have people that are there, but everything's got to go through the owner. No decision can be made, particularly the big ones, even with a CEO or a president, unless the founder or the owner is making that decision. What's your culture like? Do you have a culture? Is it a toxic culture, or is it a rich and vibrant culture? And so that's all about step 2, X factor. Step 3, what we're talking about, future buyer. Why are your customers going to come back to you? Just because we helped them today or last week, we may have been a superhero. They forget about that. The question is, what are you going to do for me tomorrow? What are you going to do for me beyond that? Are we able to tell powerful and compelling narratives of why we're so great, why our customers want to stay with us, or why a prospective customer wants to become a customer because of how we can help them, how we're communicating that, or when we're out there raising some capital or selling the business, what's the story that we're telling them? When we got the 7-figure offer, okay, yes, it was a wolf in sheep's clothing, otherwise known as the buyer who knocked at the door, but I'm going to take some responsibility here. I just showed up. I had no preparation. I didn't know about narratives. I didn't know what stories to tell. And in some ways, the 7-figure offer reflected how I presented the company, how the company wasn't prepared, what we weren't doing, because people, no different than us, a buyer and investor, they want to minimize their risk. They want to maximize their profits or the return on investment. And so they take all that into consideration. So those would be a few of the things that we need to think about of, how am I growing this business? What's my team like? How am I going to ensure that I'm in business, not just today, but tomorrow and beyond?
I'm curious, going sort of unlocking, let's say in your context, you had this, what presented as a 7-figure business. And I don't know materially what changed between 7-figure and 9-figure, outcome, whether it was purely presentation or if it was actually performance or structure or function within the business. But generally speaking, what are some of the sort of highest yields, maybe enhancements or value modifications that a business can make? I guess maybe let me ask that a little better. What are the areas in a business you typically see under captured value in a business that an owner or a founder can say, okay, let me tweak this and unlock a lot of value for a buyer?
To the uninitiated, what I'm about to say sounds absolutely crazy. In reality, it is. We're now clearly on the art side of business, not the science side of business. My contention, though, is that profits, the value of a business, what we call enterprise value, it happens not at the deal table. It's too late already. Not the negotiation table. That's already too late. It happens on the art side of the business. And by the way, Jeff, to your question, the difference between the 7 figures and the 9 figures, we weren't acquiring companies. Our growth rates were more or less the same. Yeah, the company grew, but nothing really huge or different from one year to the next. It was all in the preparation. It was in this wacky system I put together, otherwise known as the Default Mastery System, Scale for Ultimate Sale. It was how we presented ourselves. So on my podcast, the Default Podcast, I've had business evaluators come on, and they say the same thing. Jeffrey, when I look at a company, I don't even look at the financials. The first thing that I do, what's the narrative? Does the narrative put me to sleep? Does the narrative get me excited? Does the narrative have me excited about the future because of what this company is doing? 80%, they tell me, 80% of a company's value starts and stops with the narrative. And he went on to say, think about it, Jeffrey. You get some of these companies, I'm not going to name names because it changes all the time, but how can some of these companies with no profits, no revenues, how are they unicorns with these multi-billion-dollar valuations? Is all with the story. So for the listener out there, are you a storyteller? Do you know how to tell a story? Do you have a compelling story about your business, of why your business over the competition or over doing nothing? What's your story all about? And so really it's how we present ourselves to the world through our ability to tell stories. And in our program, we talk all about the science, and we go through these different studies that were done, and it links the brain function with storytelling and all those other kinds of things. It's fascinating, but it's really how we present ourselves to the world. That's really what's making the difference. As crazy as it sounds, wait a minute, Jeffrey, this isn't a complicated formula. This isn't even on a spreadsheet. It's not even a formula. You're talking about stories and all this art side of things, but that's really where the magic happens.
Yeah, as you were talking, a bunch of companies come to mind. I mean, there's a lot of hugely valuable companies don't actually make money. Uber came to mind because I only recently happened to have researched it. So it actually, we always used to say Uber's never made a profit. Uber's finally profitable as of this year, but only as of this year. It's founded in 2009 and lost money. Had to be funded and losing money for 10 years. Then it went public. And actually I could Google Uber IPO valuation. Looks like it went public at an $8 billion. Company valuation was $75 billion at IPO after 10 years of losing money. And as it turned out, still 4 years away from ever making any money. But hell of a narrative. Disrupting taxi cabs, turning, regular drivers into cab drivers. I mean, it's a cool story, and that's literally all it was for a long time. It's so crazy. So I'm curious, as you get into, and I know we're just about out of time, but I'm really fascinated by this question, and I want to get your take on it. As you work with business owners, do you find either resistance and or struggle often with business owners figuring out what the narrative of their business actually is?
Yes and no, Jeff. I mean, the bigger narrative for most listeners out there, the fatal mistake that most business owners make, and I made this mistake the first time around, it's thinking why should I spend the time or even money preparing for an exit? It could be 20 years away. I'll get there when I get there. Maybe the year before I'm ready, I'll start preparing, but by that time, it's too late. And the most frustrating thing for me when I'm speaking with business owners, Jeffrey, I hear you. It sounds like you have a great story. Congratulations on your success. What you're doing sounds terrific. I just don't have the time. Talk to me when 10 years from now, when I'm ready to sell the business, then we'll have the conversation. Well, welcome to the 90% failure rate. Welcome to leaving the 50 to over 100% of the value on the other side, on the deal table. And that's the narrative. But for the business owners that are smart enough to say, hey, you know what? I don't know what I don't know. I don't have the time. I will make the time. I will find the time. I don't have the money, but I will find the money to do this because I know if I make one less mistake, that's my ROI right there on the money side. And on the time side, listen, my financial independence, my financial freedom is on the line. Let me make the most of it. And so the biggest resistance that we find with the business owners as they're going through the program, it's really to take a step back and look at the business from a different lens. It's not about us. It's about the stakeholders. It's about the team. Do you even have a team? Is the business really running without you? And for a lot of business owners, that's the biggest hurdle. How do I fire myself from what I'm doing today? Not abdicate, but delegate to people who are better than me, smarter than me in those areas that I can help oversee, that I can then go back to what I was doing originally. I can vision, I can dream, I can do all those wonderful things that I did when the business was just starting out that I stopped doing because I got too busy working in the business instead of on the business.
So it's not so much resistance to narrative or let's say lack of storytelling aptitude. It's more just a practical resistance of not a limiting belief that either they don't have the time or that the time's not worth investing right now.
It's like peeling a layer of an onion. That's the first layer. I don't have the time, I don't have the money. But once you get beyond that, once you actually get your time back, then it's doing business a different way. And there's lots of resistance, Jeff. Come on, Jeffrey, you tell me that I'm just going to tell a story and we're going to get new business? Well, yeah. You're telling me that I can tell a compelling narrative and my business valuation is going to significantly grow up? Yes, I am. No way. Can't be. Impossible. Not going to happen. Particularly for the logical side, for the people that love the numbers. Can't happen, Jeffrey. Yet, right before their eyes, it does happen. There is a method to the madness of what we do. And it's really putting aside our beliefs. So a lot of them are myths that we're buying into that we shouldn't. And actually putting some faith, which is a whole other topic. Never really spoke about that, Jeff. But faith, some people call it the universe. I call it God. Very spiritual for myself. And that's really an important part of my life and a large part of the journey. But it's having faith in trying something a little bit different. But you know what? It's going to work out. Let me try this, see where it takes me, and see where that goes. And that's a whole other layer that we go through. And once we get through that, then there's a whole other layer. But it's, layer by layer by layer, we begin to work and then we see these remarkable changes that happen.
So I'll cap that off by saying one of my favorite sayings is that a scam is anything that promises you change without you having to change.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting that in this context, I would say to maybe on your behalf to a business owner that the idea that you can change the valuation of your business without you having to change as the business owner would be the scam. Like you want to change the value of your business, you're going to have to be willing to change how you lead the business.
That's right. A lot of heavy lifting. If you're looking for that magic bullet, if you're looking for that overnight, boom, snap my fingers, just going to happen. At least with us, we're not the place. This is not the system. Go somewhere else to try and find that.
So how can people come find out more? I'm sure they're intrigued at this point.
I'll make it really easy. Send an email, success, success. We all want success. success@deepwealth.com. That will go to me. That'll go to the team. We'll reach back out to you. Ask whatever questions that you want. Success, SUCCESS, @deepwealth.com.
And who would be the right person to reach out? Is it anybody with a business?
You know what? Whether you're thinking about starting a business, whether you've been in business for 50 years, whether you're thinking of having an exit 2 years away or 22 years away, we'd love to speak with you. Because what we do, we focus on how do you grow your profits today? How do you prepare for that liquidity event or that business exit, whenever that may be? And then we didn't talk about this, Jeff, but how do you prepare for your post-exit life? that's an area that I failed in. We reverse engineered that so that doesn't happen to other people now. But those are the three areas. So wherever that is, maybe it's all three, maybe it's one, but there's something in it really for every business owner. If you're an entrepreneur, we've got a lot to talk about. We'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for being a guest here on the show. This has been a really fascinating conversation. I might be emailing you myself. I'm intrigued. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate all the work and the paying it forward and just the education and awareness that you're putting out there. Thank you so much.
Of course. And to all the viewers and listeners out there, you know what I'm about to say. You truly are the best part of this show. You're why we do it every single day. Thanks so much for spending this time together, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
What if all of our kids made more of their identity the value they're creating in the world, not how many TikTok likes and all these other things that really make it happen for them?
It's value creation. It's how we make the world a better place.